This is my best kind of show notes because we didn't touch one of them, not even one of them. I'm not sure which one is Paul Rudd and which one is Lane Green.
Final card here is the ultimate outcome.
Today is Take Your Dog to Work Day.
Oh, like Scooby-Doo.
Yeah. Without further ado, his debut.
Sweet Caroline.
Everybody say hello to Sammy. Is that not good?
I'm just pausing so that you just are at the front of your screen.
I'm so enormously flattered.
Branding is not a bad blind date.
I'm gonna have to take a picture of this.
No, this is agape. This is love.
I really enjoyed this. You did do your homework. You asked great questions.
I'm flattered. Thank you. You just made my day.
Look at you! You are insane.
How did I do that?
How did I do that? You're insane.
Well, welcome everybody to CoronaTV. It is Wednesday, it is hump day, and I hope as we hit, it's almost like the middle of the day, this show. So we're now on the beginning of the back end of the week. Yet another week in quarantine, another week wondering what the future looks like. It helps to have a strong, singular, cohesive, authentic voice to help guide you. And I'm not talking about myself. I'm talking about a brand and a media platform like Overture. Donnovan Andrews is my guest today. I'm so happy that he is going to be in. I should probably, in fact, I will, talk a little bit about him, talk a lot about him actually, but I should mention that today is National Give Something Away Day. Yesterday I gave away my shirt because it was National Nudist Day. And I decided to do the entire show faux nude. Donnovan, you're lucky because I will keep my shirt on for you today. But the National Give Something Away Day, I love that idea. I really love the ability to give in order, to give in order to get. And as they've said, many people have said, helping is the new selling. And that is really something that I think has come through so strongly during these tough times. Even when it comes to something like writing a book or a subscription to a newspaper or a magazine, whatever we pay is never going to be commensurate with what we get back in terms of value. Just something to think about as well. So I'll bring Donnovan on shortly. He'll tell you a little bit about himself, his background, and how he came to founding this company and what kind of a company it is. And I think you're going to really enjoy it because people that are redefining the way that we report, the way that we investigate, the way, even journalism itself, media itself, we need it to be reinvented now more than ever before. So Donnovan is my hump day interviewee, my guest, but tomorrow we have Christopher S. Penn and then Brian Kramer to end the week, and I'm always just so thrilled to have everybody in. I thought I would show you this, something different. Yesterday, Charlene Lee was my 73rd interview in 74 days. And I picked 4 images to share with you. The first was actually pretty much my second interview. I was upstairs, I was in quarantine. My wife had COVID, as many of you know, and so I was in a different room. And that's me also, about 18 pounds heavier. So you compare the first photo with yesterday's one, cleanly shaven or somewhat cleanly shaven, 18 pounds lighter. The one with Mike Lipkin on the top right was the day before my wife gave me a haircut, and I had a shave or a trim for the first time. And then with Marcus Whitney on the bottom left, that was before I had a real haircut. And finally shaved. It's just been interesting to see the evolution of the show and maybe the evolution of my growth as well throughout the process. And throughout the process, you've stuck with me. So I want to thank you guys for everything. In fact, I wanted to just take it one step further, which is a lot of people have given me feedback about how important it is, how vital it is to really create deeper bonds and relationships with your audience. And so I'm going to be using my weekly newsletter now to really feed into Corona TV. And that means an idea of upcoming guests. It means sharing all the soliloquies with you, the text with you. It means even extra commentary. There is no charge, there is no fee, it's free. And if you want to subscribe to the newsletter, all you have to do is go to josephjaffe.com/subscribe or text the word Corona TV to 66866 if you're in North America. So it would mean a lot to me if you did that as well. So just before we get into the soliloquy, I do want to wish happy birthday today to all of my Facebook friends. I always have to pick out one person, and this one is an easy one to pick out. My nephew, Daniel Max Stone. Happy 23rd birthday to you, and I hope you're having a great day with your family. I miss you, and I can't wait to see you soon. And of course, happy LinkedIn birthday as well. I put a little exclamation point next to Joe Applebaum, because I'm pretty sure this is the 3rd or 4th time in 4 months I'm wishing him happy birthday. So I don't know what he's doing to manipulate the algorithm, but if I'm wishing Joe happy birthday again in the next few weeks, then we know that there is either 5 doppelgangers or imposters, or Joe's just manipulating the system. Either way, happy birthday, Joe. Well, now it's time for the seated soliloquy. And, the seated soliloquy today is all about marriage. It's all about marriage, and specifically a specific type of marriage, the marriage between technology and humanity. Well, what does it mean to advance and curate the intersection between technology and humanitarianism? Humanitarianism, if I got that right, humanitarianism. That's the mission behind Overture Global, which was founded by my friend Donnovan Andrews, my guest today. I don't have to think too hard to immediately come up with an explanation or an interpretation. And that's because it's actually something that I've been thinking about and talking about for years now. It might not be the meaning of life, but I do believe it actually speaks to the secret of success pre, during, or post-COVID. It begins with a quote from an executive at American Express years back, who said something to the effect of, "This is a people business powered by technology." And I built on that, I modified it to read as follows: "This is a customer and employee-centric ecosystem powered by technology." I wanted to stress the interconnectedness of everything and everyone, and recognize the role that technology plays in terms of facilitating and celebrating these connections. But what are we actually talking about here? I think we're talking about a beautiful marriage, the perfect partnership between technology and humanity. It's not an or, it's an and. And when all is said and done, this is less about superiority and subordination and more about balance, equilibrium, and equality. Sounds simple, right? So how come it's so hard for corporations to figure it out? Why do companies hide behind technology to further depersonalize an already faceless and cold corporation, devoid of genuine emotion and empathy? Some might call it laziness, when automation becomes the default blunt instrument to make things as easy and efficient as possible. Only it comes at a price, and that price is the relationship itself. Whether it's telling stories, reporting on current events, or just selling stuff, content and context need to work together as partners in crime in order to create a 1-2 punch that provides both flexibility and consistency. And that's how you win in today's volatile, confusing world. Well, now someone who is bringing clarity to confusion, order to chaos, it's my friend and the founder of Overture Global, Donnovan Andrews. Donnovan, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. This is a great opportunity to speak with you and your audience, and it's a great opening, by the way, as well. Loved it.
Thank you. I got a little more tongue-tied than I thought with the word humanitarianism. Now I got it. And depersonalization.
Yeah, it's a high school SAT word. Also, thank you for reminding me. This is our, National Giveaway? Give Something Away Day, you said?
Right, exactly.
I have on my desk a Google Glass Do you remember these?
Yes.
Yeah. So.
Well, that I think you want to give that away.
Unopened, untouched. I can send it to you. That'll give you. That's something I'm giving away to you. There you go.
I appreciate it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to send you my Google Glass back. It
meant
was
well.
one
The
of those
technology
things.
meant well. It was good. It was well intentioned. It was early stages, early days. I fully believe that they will make a comeback and bring something interesting to the world. I believe that.
And by the way, Jason Burnham is here, and he said, "Great to see you, Donnovan."
I love Jason.
You know, it's so funny. I mean, you said it meant well, which I think is I love that idea. You know, creating this beautiful intent, this like shame, poor technology. You know, you meant well. We'll give you an A for effort.
But look, do you remember the Apple Newton?
Yeah.
Do you remember the Newton? So that was a touchscreen, right, with handwriting recognition. So after that, many years after that, came the Palm Pilot, and then many years after that came the iPhone. So sometimes we don't get it right on the first time around, right? Which is probably a good portion of a good part of what we're going to talk about today in terms of how technology has great intentions, but every once in a while we miss the mark, but we get it right in the long run. And is that Joey Dumont over there?
Yeah, but I realize his comment is you might have to lift yourself up a little bit, or there you go. Let's see if I do that. That's better, right? Yeah, Joey has become. He was a friend. He's become a really good friend. He's with us in the Zoom after show, which will make sure that I know you have to leave a little early today, but we'll make sure that we hang out a little bit in the after show together. I'm sure Mr. Burnham will be with us as well. But you're absolutely right, Donnovan, and there are two parts, right? One is we recognize that everything has a purpose and everything happens for a reason, and everything is part of a process. You know, sometimes it happens to you, which is you can't grow and you can't change and you can't evolve without the school of hard knocks. And other times, you know, being a pioneer, it's a mistake, an industry mistake that clears the way, you know, for others to improve on it. You know, sometimes it's selfish and sometimes it's selfless, but it all works together, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, we're in a world where technology is constantly evolving, and it is a hyper competitive space, right? So the way I look at it now, like especially when we look at the pieces of technology that have been deployed to, you know, get us pizza, get us booze, get us get us an Uber or a car ride. At some point in time, we're going to get to the point where we start asking ourselves, what happens when we start to deploy that same technology and the same mindset and the same thought process and applying that to helping people around the world, right? So is that your ESPN alert? Right.
That's a kind of schoolboy error, because I thought I always put my sound down. But you know, I guess even hosts of up to 74 interviews, we still make mistakes.
Make a mistake because you know why? Because you're human, right?
Exactly.
They're probably talking about Dak Prescott finally getting a contract. We'll see if that happens. But you know, so what I'm saying is. Mm-hmm.
No, I was going to say, by the way, I'll take you a Newton if you'd like to send me the Newton. That I'd like to add to my collection. Sorry, as you were saying.
Yeah, what I was just saying is that, you know, we at some point in time, you know, we as an industry, we developed and we decided that it was in our best interest to take some of the best minds that were available and task them on getting people to click on ads, or, you know, the refresh rates of delivering ads, right? But somehow at some point in time, we have to get to a place where we start to say, how do we get some of the best minds of this generation, focus them on using technology to fix some of the problems that are around us every single day, right? So we still have massive issues around voting, right? We have conversations about mailing in ballots, and that's a big topic right now. But we're not having some of the most obvious questions, which is like, how do we get people to vote on their mobile devices? right? How do we get people to vote from home using the internet, right? And there's some challenges around that, especially what we saw in terms of outside interference from the last election. But we know that there is a way for us to get there. We know that banks have been able to provide significant levels of security over time, consistent levels of security. So we still have to explore how we get there, as opposed to, retreating and then start talking about paper ballots and and we're talking about paper ballots while at the same time we're talking about quantum computing, right? Those are some of the things we have to take in the context, right? At the same time, and we'll talk about, we talk a little bit more about Black Lives Matter and the movement, but at the same time, all of that was happening. We were putting men into rockets and sending them into space, right? So we know that we can be progressive and innovative and accomplished in one area. We just have to start applying it to so many other areas of life.
Doesn't it make you though wonder at the same time? And I've also thought about that. I thought about how we can't even figure out how to heal the partisan divide, yet we put man on the moon. But I think in the middle of that, I wonder why the entire world, the globe, mankind, or humankind, I should say, has been caught flat-footed, and with their pants down when it comes to COVID. And with all these Nobel, prize winners and laureates and doctors and scientists, why we're still almost hamstrung as humanity to figure out how to conquer this thing and teach each other and share and come up with a solution.
I think we failed in a bunch of different areas, right? And I think one of the biggest areas is we failed from is from the top down, right? We're not leading from the highest office in the land. We're not leading. We're not looking at this as a global event that is our generation's world war, and coordinating global forces so that we can bring solutions and bring solutions to the world and to ease people's suffering. We're not doing that, right? We're having, for some reason, we turn face masks into a political wedge, right? How is that a wedge issue? I can never understand that, right? We walked away from science a long time ago, and it was a slow and gradual process, and it got us to this point where we start to look at this as COVID, and people are saying it's a hoax. And that's because, we slowly started to chip away in the belief that we've had and the proof points around science and data. And now we're seeing it in full force, right? So I think that, I'm an optimist, though. I believe that we're going to have some big changes coming our way in November and on January 20th, which is my birthday, by the way. And that'll put us in a position where, right? It means every 4 years I get a really good gift or a really bad one. So I think that'll put us in a position where we can start to lead a coordinated force of optimism and logic and rationale and science to help to combat this around the world.
So I want to talk a little bit about the power of the ampersand, the and versus or. Jason said technological evolution should enhance the human experience, and something that you actually say, I really love this positioning. You talk about innovation and humanitarian technology. So that's kind of like gave me part of my inspiration between the idea of technology and humanity. But here you're actually calling it humanitarian technology and innovation. Maybe talk a little bit about the power of the ampersand, because instead of having to say, face masks good, face mask bad, why not figure out the middle ground? Or and this is now when we're going to obviously talk about your company. Is that a bad thing to actually have to try and find the perfect middle ground or equilibrium? Because what's that old saying? If you try and be all things to all people, you end up being nothing to nobody. Exactly. So where do you sit in that continuum?
Well, look, let's just go back to that middle ground on that example. I think that in instances like this, you have to follow science, right? You have to follow the directive of people that have been trained in these areas and trained in these spaces, and not only have studied this specific instance in this moment, but the hundreds of epidemics before this, right, all around the world, right? So so when scientists are telling you that, yeah, it's probably in your best interest to wear a face mask, you should probably wear a face mask, right? We're not seeing any data saying that you should not, and that you'll be better off for not wearing a face mask. So I think that I don't think there's a middle ground in areas like that. I firmly believe we need to go with science, right? What was the other part of your question?
Well, I mean, there might be a middle ground. Well, I think what we're talking about is this idea of marriage between two extremes, or finding the bridging the divide. I mean, I heard the other day, which I actually think is interesting, and we'll use that as a kind of as a backdrop to some things that are in the news at the moment, which is if look, at a time when politicking or campaigning is at a tremendous disadvantage, no rallies, etc. And he still could do this. Let's just talk about Trump as an entrepreneur. He could easily have manufactured hundreds of thousands of "Make America Great" or "Make America Great Again" or "Keep America Great" face masks, and had just walking campaign ads, for all of his base. Well, that could be an interesting application of that middle ground.
Yeah, it could be. It could be. But again, I think I can't wrap my head around it, because I don't sit in that camp well enough to understand the mindset of choosing mantra over medicine, right? Because that just doesn't make sense to me. But I would imagine for some people that would make sense for them. But at some point in time, they would have to take the mask off when they're not at the rally, and they'd have to make a decision whether or not they're going to believe in the science, right?
Yeah. So I think if I hear you correctly, and to kind of reframe what you're saying look for the compromise, except when there isn't a compromise to be made. Some things need to be absolutely black and white. It's left or right. Yogi Berra said, if you come to a fork in the road, take it. And I think it's about picking and choosing what is debatable versus what is not debatable.
And that's exactly it. When you look at some of these things, there's not much room for debate. There's not much logic behind the areas of the debate either. So I think as a leader, you have to put people in a position where they understand that you are making the best decision for them, for the country, or for the organization, for the team, or for the unit, and you have to move in that direction. When you start to insert too many options, you bring in ambiguity, and in this instance, the ambiguity costs lives.
But a lot of that comes down to trust, credibility, and integrity, and I think that's a really good segue to talk a little bit about Overture, because you're an ad man. You come from the same media business as I do. And yet here you are as the founder, as an entrepreneur, creating an incredible brand. And I wonder if you could just take a few moments to talk a little bit about your journey and this discovery, and tell us a little bit about the company. And quite frankly, what is the itch that you felt needed to be scratched to form this company, and talk a bit about your mission and what you hope to achieve and change.
Yeah, so my journey is, coming from the media world. I came from the big agencies, and oddly enough, it was one of those times, when I was in my 20s, I was like 25, 26 when I broke off and started my own agency. But what prompted me was, I looked around, and you look around and you see, well, there's no one like me there's no one at any of these agencies that looks like me. Right. We didn't have those levels of diversity that we have now. And even the levels that they are today are pretty paltry. Right. So, so I knew that was the writing was kind of on the wall. So I broke off and I started my own agency. And that was, I was pretty young in doing that. Not many people did that at that time. Now you have people starting companies like 21 and 22, sometimes even 19. But at that time, I wanted to start up and do something that was going to be interesting for me. And be able to build something that was going to be, right at the core of where the internet was. So what I mean by that is that we were at that position where performance marketing was being was just taking off. So we were in a position to win American Express, the consumer card, small business card, Coca-Cola, ESPN, Financial Times. So we built that business over a bunch of years, and we had a great team and good people and good co-founders. So excited for that. And that was a good run, right? That was when we met. Those were the early days of the internet, and yeah, so it was a lot of good fun. And then since then I broke off from there and was able to be a part of other companies and doing interesting things where I was kind of like the entrepreneur, or I think they call them like the head of innovation, right? So starting different products or business units or divisions at larger companies, different organizations. And then, when it was time to do something different, I was looking around and it was kind of like, different movies, same ending, right? So I wanted to do something that was going to be really compelling in the world, to talk about how we, to talk about some of the global macro issues that are driving society, that are driving human beings, and being at essentially that intersection, right? The intersection of change and human development and innovation, and knowing that most of the bigger problems that we have to solve in society today and in the future the solutions will probably be driven by technology and innovation, right? So we know that we have to start applying data and innovation and rapid response to some of the health issues that we have, the issues around nutrition, transportation, and we need to cover them in a different way from the editorial and from the content perspective. So I looked at it as like, we have to be able to do that. And so that's when I started Overture, and I decided to be essentially that voice of that change, right? That's saying, if you look around and no one's doing it, that means that you should. So that's what pretty much brought me to where we are.
That's a great quote. I love that quote. So we're going to get into the what, but I want to focus a little bit on the how and the to whom. My initial thinking was it was kind of Vice meets current in a TikTok enabled era, but that was my initial. But talk a little bit about because there's a magazine, right? There's what is the best of the old, what is the best of the new, and talk a little bit about your audience.
So it's we started out with a printed publication, and going into the fall, we'll be moving heavily into video, right? So when you say I like that mashup that you have there, but we're kind of like, we look at ourselves as kind of like The Economist meets Vice meets Fast Company. So what we really want to do is be focusing on
nice.
Right. So, it's an interesting intersection, right? When you look at what our core ethos was, what drove me to start this, essentially that's where we are today, right? When you look at the conversations that we're having around the future of work in a COVID impacted world, the future of education, universal basic income, all of those conversations, now that we have been impacted by COVID, and then we instantly got introduced to the struggles and the challenges that Black people have faced around the world. And I think for most people were most people kind of oblivious to it. I think most people, they kind of knew it was hard, but they really didn't understand the challenges that people of color had to face on an everyday basis, just commuting, and then on a professional basis. So I think that folks who didn't understand that, and I think that where both these things came together, and Overture is it's right there, because this is kind of what we planned for in terms of our conversations, but I never knew it would be this big. I never thought that any of these things would be meeting at this time and at this place and have this much of a movement behind it.
Well, I have some sublime and I have some ridiculous. We thought we'd start off with the ridiculous, but I think we're going to end, if there's time, on the ridiculous, because the reality is there's so much substance to what you do, and so much of a need for this as well. By the way, I've reskinned your positioning. Economist meets Vice meets TikTok. with a smiley face. But I tell you, I had Lane Green on from The Economist, and he's a language columnist and editor, and I asked him a question at the beginning, which is, why does The Economist need a linguist or a language columnist? And he just blew me away with a couple of these articles that he had written. One of them as to why we need to be able to spell out expletives and even racial slurs when reporting, because by not doing that, we're diluting the impact that the reader needs to actually experience, the outrage, the deep emotions, and I won't go into the other ones, but I think a lot of that comes to the table, or comes to the forefront when you look at some of the things that you've done. So I thought we'd kind of focus on the substance, and if there's a little bit of time left over, I'll ask, what does either Donnovan Andrews think about what's going on in the news, or how would Overture report on this, if at all. So let's start off with Black Lives Matter. And as I said the other day, I think even to one of my guests, I saw someone's Instagram story that said Black lives still, almost like still matter, like we've fatigued, we've moved on to the next story. So talk a little bit about this piece and this focus and how you are handling this incredibly important moment and movement.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we did here was we posted photos from the different Black Lives Matter protests from all around the world. And it was extremely important because we got to see that this struggle was not just an American one, right? This struggle is something that's taking place in Australia. It's in Australia, it's in Belgium. We saw what's happening in the UK. It's everywhere. And essentially what what we wanted to show here is that this movement has taken off around the world, because what we've seen is that wherever we are, the darker skin has always been marginalized and have been disenfranchised from the mainstream, right? So what we see as a movement right here in the U.S. is not just it's not isolated to being a U.S. issue against racism. It's a global conversation on against racism, right? Because a lot of this came from, the backgrounds of, or a lot of this is the byproduct of cultures that had these heavily colonialist societies, right? And with that, you had to, these folks had to tell themselves certain things to go into other countries and do what they did. And of course, they brought that home, and then that spread around the world. So to see all of these young folks all around the world marching in solidarity is special. And it has turned into the largest movement that the world has ever seen. Not just the largest racial justice movement, but the largest movement, period, full stop. So, and it's special because we know that this is going to change a lot, and we know that this is not going to go away. This is not like what we saw, back in 2014. This is going to be a movement that will be here with us for the rest of our days.
A big part of that is action and execution and impact. Talk a little bit about how a media platform, right, video, digital, a magazine, how do you move words into effecting change? Is it a battle? Is it a challenge, or is there a specific strategy when it comes to being able to recognize the power of words spoken, and whether it's the written word, the spoken word, to create deep, meaningful, enduring change?
It's a couple things. I think it's about awareness. I think as long as we're having conversations about this, it is raising the awareness, and it is bringing education and knowledge and understanding to other people. And with understanding come conversations, and with the conversations, we can get to solutions, right? So I think that that's part of our job. That's what we have to do every single day. And I think that what we have to do is continue to do that with frequency. The challenges are obviously for us is that we're smaller. So there are limitations in terms of like who we can reach out to and who we can connect with in that sense. But we have to do we do it in a different way that's a bit more meaningful, and areas that we focus on tend to be off the path for most most journalists and for most media companies.
I want to just skip to something that's actually in the news right now, which is Mary Trump's book. And what was interesting to me, and I want to tie it back to Black Lives Matter, because what was interesting to me, Donnovan, is that the standard pushback on any negative book, and at the moment it's certainly against the current administration, but there's no reason why it wouldn't be, if it was a different administration, is this is just someone who is out for profit and is lying and is just looking to cash in. And the reason why I show this is I'm sure you're familiar with a book called White Fragility, which is by Robin DiAngelo. And I heard a criticism against the book the other day, which was that this is just a means for the author to get hired to consult. And so again, it's the pushback that everything and everyone has an agenda. And I'm just curious as to first of all, can anybody be 100% purely, pure in terms of not having any, for example, should Mary Trump, should this book on white privilege or trying to understand it, should there be zero profits, which doesn't make sense? How do you get over the skepticism that almost looks to debunk or minimize the importance or the clout or the truth, because there is truth in everything, even in a lie?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think where we are today, and for better or worse, is that we are at high levels of skepticism, right? Like everyone sees something and everyone's immediately thinking of the other side. But I think what we have to do first and foremost is recognize when something is true, right? Challenge it in certain ways and accept it in certain ways, right? Like we can't be in a situation where we start to throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? Because there are a lot of people that are bringing these conversations and they're bringing stories that we don't know about, and bringing point of views and perspectives that are helpful, that are useful, and that most people have never thought of. So to immediately look at and say, okay, this is just a gateway into someone else's consulting career, I would pause on that and just understand and try to take a step back and understand when someone is delivering you a message, and understand what is true, what is not, and what to embrace as fact, how to look at something and analyze it and make it your own, right? And make your own decisions and make your own actions on it from there. The one thing that we have with the internet is there's a ton of access. There's a lot of access to information. So if you get something and you have questions around it, it doesn't put you on a path where you have to accept that writer's truth or that writer's consultancy. You can create your own pathway to understanding and developing a framework to help you live a better life, or just become a bit more knowledgeable in that subject matter.
I think that was magnificently said, and I think what I took away from that is, first of all, before you criticize or push back on anything, especially if it doesn't represent your worldview, strip out the messenger, focus on the message, and challenge yourself to find truth in that message, and then attempt to maybe dissect and say, well, this stuff maybe not so much, and this definitely not, but this is interesting, and how can that help me grow? Donnovan, I always do a little bit of fun with my guests, which is come up with a nice obscure quote, which I think, which I try and bring in at the perfect time of the show, and I think it's a perfect time to bring in this quote, which is, there can be no higher law in journalism than to tell the truth and to shame the devil. Any chance you know who said that?
No, I don't. Who said that?
That was Walter Lippmann, American writer, reporter, and political commentator, famous to have first introduced the concept of the Cold War. So
okay.
He also, thanks to Wikipedia, he coined the term stereotype in the modern psychological meaning. I could go on, but I won't.
Okay.
So I thought that was interesting. All right, so let's move to another an amazing focus, which is called Populations of Concern: Our World of Refugees. And first of all, congratulations, because I see that you won. Well, you were a finalist as well. But the subhead intrigues me, right? Data is the key to dealing with the causes of displacement. I think, by the way, this might, Stephen said, why so much emphasis on technology instead of humanitarian expertise? But this is actually demonstrating that, coming through, right?
Yeah, a couple of things. So now I'll get to his question first, which is what we're trying to say is like, the humanitarian endeavors have always been there, and that's great, and they should be, and they've done an amazing job. But what we know now is that some of the problems that are going to be coming around the corner in the next 5 years, 10 years, 50 years, they're going to be even bigger than the ones that we've ever experienced. We live in an interconnected world, a hyper-connected world. We saw how quickly this pandemic has spread. We saw how quickly Corona moved from one part of the world to another part and just kept moving. So we know that technology has the ability to share information, develop and deliver data, parse data, and put us in a position where we can actually move ahead, because we'll have the ability to project and forecast and to predict, right? So with that, we have to start to incorporate data and technologies in ways that we never have been able to before, so that we can start to save more lives. If we keep doing it the same old ways, that's an old saying, if you want to get what you're not getting, you got to start doing what you're not doing, right? And I think that's where we are with some of these things. So we have to look at it in terms of like, how do we deploy technology and the people behind some of these technologies to help save lives, and not just get us a faster pizza.
So now let's talk a little bit about the focus on on the refugee crisis, and specifically just the angle you've taken, and a couple of insights from there.
Yeah, I think it's similar to what I just mentioned. I think the way we looked at it was, we gathered a lot of data from different organizations, from different NGOs, and you can post that link to have people view it when they get a chance. And we created an infographic, and it showed the different countries and their population with the folks that are either displaced or imminent refugees. So it gave a lot of perspective in terms of what's happening with the crisis, and we know that there's a lot of blowback from some of these countries in terms of being able to accept refugees into them. But when you look at it in the general scale against their total population, it really isn't that many people. So there is no invasion of people from other cultures and other religions coming into your country to take it over. That's a complete and total farce. But it's part of the populism that was sweeping through Europe. But when you see the data in the perspective of an infographic, you get to see how tiny it is and how insignificant that the numerical amount is on a population. But at the same time, if you start to look at the data from your head and then you open your heart, you understand you can put yourself in a position, your countries can put yourself in a position where you're saving lives and changing changing the outcome of many people, especially a lot of young children.
It makes me think back to like some of the early days, of course, when we met each other, and I was giving a lot of presentations on online creativity, or creativity online, or the lack thereof. And I said, I'm going to make a prediction that there will be a Grand Prix, there will be a Cannes Lion award for the best data plan, or for the best, for the best use of data from a creative standpoint. And I think, in a way, maybe I should just give it to you now. But it's a different element, right, between technology and humanity. It's also being able to use the data to tell better stories, different stories, or stories in different ways. And sometimes it is just the visualization, the animation, or just something as almost I mean, we almost kind of, it's almost like innocuous, right? The infographic, it's like passé, it's cliched, but it's very powerful to be able to create things, sliders, the ability to move and manipulate. I mean, I remember seeing one that from the New York Times that actually showed the percentage of, of people of color and even, women, females in the boardroom. And you were able to kind of just look at it from different companies in different states. And it was illuminating, when you look at different shades of, even if we look at the map of the United States map with respect to greens and reds and purples in terms of infections, very, very valuable.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so we'll touch on this very briefly as well, because this is another, intersection both in terms of content and context with respect to technology and humanity. This was something that you did on contact tracing, and apparently there's an app for that. We don't have it, but apparently there's an app for that.
And I can explain why we don't have it and when we will have it. So essentially,
please do.
Yeah. So what's happened is around the world, different countries have launched their own apps that have allowed people to essentially enable the contact tracing process if you are someone in your circle has test positive for having COVID-19, right? So there are two different ways of doing it. One is having a centralized database, and of course that can bring up some challenges, especially depends on what kind of government is running your country. And then there are there's another version where that allows for you to, all of the data stays on your phone and it is encrypted. And with that version, your Bluetooth is on constantly in the background. So it's always checking in with other devices to know who you've come in contact with. And it would send an alert out to that person and say, Mike was tested positive, and Mike was found to be positive, and you should either go get a test or start the process of self-quarantine, right? So that makes perfect sense. Now what was happening is that some countries were not allowing for this version to take place because, or to be deployed in their country, because this version was a partnership between Google and Apple. So there was some uncertainty and some distrust around it. But it looks like more and more countries are being open to having that version being deployed in their country because it's far more superior. Again, anonymized data and constant contact with Bluetooth running in the background. So it's a lot more accurate. So that's working. So the challenge now in the US as to whether or not that app comes here, it's at the state level. So now each state will have to make a decision, right, as to whether or not they want to incorporate that technology into their contact tracing system and deploy it. But I think that I think it'll be something that will go back and forth. And I think we know that some states are going to accept it more readily than others. And we know exactly which ones they will be, and then we'll go from there. But I think that as we go into the fall, we should expect to see a lot more states accept that second version of the app, because it will put us in a position where we'll be able to capture the data and bring more people to safety than we were able to do previously in the U.S. and abroad.
I think basically what I'm hearing is translation. We're in big trouble because I'm not using the economist best practice of spelling it out. But yeah. I mean, but I think, by the way, and not for nothing, as someone who wasn't born here as well, the inability for the states to be able to align and coordinate and read from the same sheet music, it's just it's mind blowing. I had one audience member who on LinkedIn tried to make a comparison between the EU with different countries, but within a union, to the states and the United States. But I just I mean, I could see the analogy, but it's just breathtaking. I'm a citizen, right? Yeah. But it's still somewhat of an outsider to say, why the hell can we just not get everybody to use the same damn iOS or the same, or the same app, or just get on board? It's beyond frustrating.
Yeah, I've heard that the different European states, the U.S. states comparison been done before. The challenge with that is that we're supposed to be one people. In terms of our nationality, right? So with that, we have one. We're supposed to have one priority, which is advancing our country and keeping people safe and working towards a common ideals, right? It's very different when you're in Europe and it's a very new union, very new cultures that are coming together, right? You can't even get electronic appliances to work across borders, right? So I think that we should be in a better position than everyone else. But right now we have a political, we just have a political situation that's a bit more tenuous, and we just need new leadership.
Well, I think that we've had many conversations on the show about government and the role of and the responsibilities of. We've had also the debate, which is when government doesn't step up or shouldn't step up in some cases, big business or business needs to step up. In other cases, you have organizations that have done a pretty good job in terms of, for example, stepping up and attempting to eradicate poverty. And then I guess there's a fourth category, which is you, and it's the role of responsible media, truth-telling media, or combaters of the devil media, or at least new forms of media, to say we can actually create a dialogue, a discourse, a debate, respectfully, creatively, intelligently, strategically, to elevate us beyond all the vitriol, and create consensus and meaningful outcomes. And that's what you're doing, my friend. And I'm, if I may say, I've always admired you and respected you, but I'm proud of you too, as all of your friends watching as well, like Mr. Minsky.
Hey,
so I'm going to let you have the final word and just tell people, besides obviously, the obvious one is going to the website and finding out about it, but tell us about how we can give you our time and our money and support you. But before we do that, I would be remiss if I didn't devolve this very serious, intense, and meaningful conversation into the ridiculous, which is in 10 seconds or less. I just want you to give me some commentary on, number one, Goya beans. Are you a buyer or a seller of Goya right now, the brand?
Seller.
Okay, you're a seller. What about Clorox? What about the meme? You got to be a buyer of this meme, because this is the gift that keeps on giving.
It's I don't know what they were thinking. I don't know what they were thinking. Like the memes are just priceless, and it's just yet another situation for us to have to manage.
I know this might set a record of number of memes in less than 24 hours.
24 hours, yeah.
What about President Kanye?
No President Kanye.
No, certainly. I mean, he pulled out today. Do you think the bid was legit, or do you think it was a means to maybe just keep him in, or just, I mean, he's a master marketer.
I didn't consider it. How's that? I knew it was going to end exactly the way it ended. I knew it was going to be a waste of everyone's time. I knew it was. Yeah. I didn't consider it at all. I knew he was not.
I will say one thing, and you may think less of me because of it, but I did send him a tweet, and I invited him onto CoronaTV to give him a platform to talk about his campaign promises and what. But sadly, he did not respond. But anyway, Donnovan, sometimes you've got to be able to, if you don't laugh, you cry. And
that is true. In these times, that is true.
Now, Donnovan has a real job, so he doesn't have too much time to share with us in the after show, but we're going to move over and hopefully he will give us 10 or 15 minutes there. But Donnovan, just tell us a little bit more about how people can support and quite frankly become customers, readers, viewers of Overture's of Overture Global.
Yeah, clearly subscribe to our social channels. We're putting stuff up there on a regular basis. There's a lot of new stuff that we're going to be announcing in the coming weeks. So I'm looking forward to that, and I look forward to sharing that with everyone. And of course, if anyone wants to work with us in any way, they can reach out to me. They can reach me on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and anywhere. And then lastly, I just say, just be a part of it. That's what I have to say to everyone. Just be a part of it. There's a lot happening right now. There's a lot happening. And I know it's probably challenging for everyone in different ways, but I think probably the most therapeutic thing to do is just be a part of it, whether it's finding out whether that old person down the street needs someone to go pick up groceries for them, or joining a protest, or joining a vigil, or making sure that you bring more diversity into your companies and into your lives. Just be a part of it. Like, you don't want to look back at this moment 5-10 years from now and just realize that you didn't do anything, that you just coasted through it. I think it'll be better for you, for your family, and for society. Just be a part of it.
I am going to give you this free bit of consulting and creative contribution because it is Give Something Away for Free Day, and I am getting a Newton from you. Overture's new tagline: be a part of it.
Love it. I like that it's free, even better.
Yeah, I mean, it's I have to be true to myself. Donnovan, thank you for coming in today, and it's been just as always, just a pleasure to spend time with you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Take care.
Take care, bro.